Good evening. My name is Christoph Straub, and I'm the Senior Manager of Adult Learning here at TIFF. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special event, Julian Schnabel on At Eternity's Gate. Yes. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. On behalf of TIFF, I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and our major public supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. Also, a thank you to donors and members for supporting our TIFF's charitable mission of bringing the power of film to life 365 days a year. A big thank you to Elevation Pictures for making tonight's event possible. At Eternity's Gate arrives in select theaters this Friday and will play here at TIFF Bell Lightbox as of next Friday, November 30th. Make sure to tell all of your friends. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our host for tonight. For 3 decades, Brian D. Johnson served as senior arts writer and film critic for Maclean's, for which he remains a contributing editor. From 2009 until 2016, he served as president of the Toronto Film Critics Association. He has worked professionally as a journalist, author, musician, and filmmaker. In 2015, he directed El Purdy Was Here, a feature documentary about the legendary Canadian poet. Throughout his career, Brian has hosted onstage interviews with authors, actors, and filmmakers, and we're very glad that he's hosting tonight's event. So please join me in welcoming Brian D. Johnson.
Thank you, Christoph. You can hear me? Yeah, good. You could say, I guess, that every filmmaker is an artist, but there are artists and then there are artists. We often talk about a filmmaker's vision being painterly, but that is more true than usual with our guest tonight. He's an artist who is equally at home creating images on a big canvas or on the big screen. His paintings, sculptures, and works on everything from paper to shattered plates have been exhibited all over the world. He made the leap to filmmaking in 1996 with Basquiat, an exhilarating portrait of an artist by an artist, starring the young Jeffrey Wright. And for a first feature, you got to admit, it had quite the cast. Benicio del Toro, Christopher Walken, and Dennis Hopper, Gary Oldman, Courtney Love, David Bowie, and Willem Dafoe. Between paintings, he made 4 more films, including Before Night Falls, the story of a persecuted Cuban writer, which got Javier Bardem his first Oscar nomination. And most famously, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which took Best Director in Cannes and at the Golden Globes, and 4 Oscar nominations. Well, now, 22 years after Basquiat, we have At Eternity's Gate, an extraordinary film about another visionary artist, brilliantly portrayed by Willem Dafoe. Please welcome an artist whose vision knows no bounds, Julian Schnabel.
Hi, hello. Thanks for coming. So, why don't you watch the movie and we'll come back later? If you feel like it, and we can talk about it. We don't have to say anything immediately right after you see it. We'll give you a moment to breathe, and then we can do it. One thing I wanted to say is just don't move until the yellow comes up at the end. You'll have a surprise, okay? Sometimes there's a sort of peculiar ending to the movie, so just wait till you see the yellow of their eyes. All right. David, you in here somewhere? Where are you? Hi, how are you? Hi, Julie. Okay, well, thank you for coming, and thank you for that nice introduction, Brian. We'll come back and we can regroup. How does that sound? Thank you. Okay.
Please welcome back director Julian Schnabel.
Thank you.
thank you for bringing the yellow sun into our hearts.
Thank you for having a heart.
It's the least I can do.
Maybe can we make so we could see the audience also? It's a little bright up here, but I guess is it getting recorded? I guess.
I don't know. They're
All
there.
right, but that's good.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
good. See all the victims.
Julian, among other things, this film asks the question, why make art and how make art? How do you make art and why do you make it? And people are asking Vincent all the time, why are you on about what you're on about? Even though to him, the answer seems plain as day, literally. What choice does he have? But to turn that question to you, why did you decide to make this art about Vincent van Gogh? What sparked it?
Well, there's a line in the movie where Vincent says, I feel like I could make people feel like they are more alive. And Dr. Ray says, you feel like they don't feel alive? He says, yes, I do. And you feel like you can make them feel more alive through painting? He says, absolutely. And then he looks for something in his teeth. I guess first of all, you make something because, and I'm not just talking about this movie, I think you make something because you're trying to understand what life is in the first place. And then I guess to me, I feel more alive when I'm painting, or in this case, when we made this movie. And why does anybody want to share that with someone else? I don't know. My mother was very nice. And she was an educator in some kind of way, and I don't know why I would even feel like I could show anybody something that they wouldn't know. But I guess having a proximity to painting, and never really, I didn't really want to make a movie about Vincent van Gogh because everybody thinks that they know everything about him, and people have done a fine job of, but basically obfuscating the essence of what he does. I mean, I really think that if you look at his paintings, when he says, I am my paintings, you have everything right there. I don't know that Vincent needed me to make this movie.
But he's been sort of buried alive in his own legend in a way over the years. And so I guess part of your challenge is to try to break through that, that
mausoleum.
Whatever, yeah, to find a living human being there. And there's something incredibly tender about this film and the life that you create with Willem. But was there a particular, I mean, when I said what made you want to do it, not just in the grand sense of why make art, but was there anything, an incident that sort of said, oh, I could do this, Was there something? Weren't you in a museum? Weren't you in the Musée d'Orsay avec
Jean-Claude Carrier.
Yeah, was that a moment?
Well, there was a Van Gogh and Antonin Artaud exhibition there, and we were lucky enough to be able to go in there when it was closed, and we were looking at these paintings by ourselves. And the paintings are very intimate, and I mean, I love Artaud's drawings. They're some of my favorite drawings. It's funny because Pierre Loeb was an art dealer, and he wanted to make this exhibition. I don't know if it was in 1914 or if it was later, if it was in the 30s. I can't even remember when it was, but he had Antonin Artaud write the catalog text. And Artaud wrote about madness, but his madness was different than Van Gogh's madness. But it didn't matter because they were joined together at the hip because he wrote the catalog text. Right. So they put the text with the paintings. I don't think they had anything to do with those paintings. But that's interesting, just by proximity, how things can color other things. I love Artaud's drawings. But his madness is, I don't know if you compare two different people's madness, if you get a clear idea of one. But in looking at those paintings, I was describing what I was seeing to Jean-Claude. And at that moment, in his head, I think, he thought, well, why don't we make a movie about this? Because he felt like I was speaking for Van Gogh to him. I didn't know that until a couple months ago. But what I thought at the time was that if you approached making a movie the way you look at paintings in a museum or in a room, say there's 15 paintings you're looking at. Each painting is different. Different way that the artist is expressing one thing, whether it's the color or the image, it's a landscape or a portrait, or the next one has something else. But after you look at 15 different works, each one had a particular story to tell you or response that you have to it. If you look at 15 of them, at the end you walk out and then you have this accumulative effect of having looked at 15 works, different versions of things that somebody, like listening to different chords in a piece of music. So I thought if we construct the story like that and forget the idea of making a biography, or certainly a forensic biography, and just think, oh, well, this is a possible story that could have happened. He might have been there. He could have talked about that. Well, it's a great opportunity to have Van Gogh talk about Christ and say, well, nobody heard about Christ during his lifetime. And I mean, nobody knew he was till 30 or 40 years after he died. I mean, there wasn't a letter from a Roman centurion to his wife saying there was a guy named Christ or Jeshua in Rome, and or Van Gogh talking about Shakespeare, saying that, yeah, he's the most mysterious of all writers. And the lady says, well, when I read something, I like to understand what I'm reading. Or the war in Indochina was going on at the time he was alive. So Jean-Claude what happened to be the secretary to the general in Algeria, and he was just talking to me. He said, yeah, there were all officers are insane. They've mutilated, raped. I thought all of it sounded like dialogue. And then, so we started like that.
Jean-Claude Carrière, for those who don't know, worked with Louis Buñuel for 19 years. So you and he kind of, the spark sort of started there. But also, I mean, the film was collaboratively done. Your partner, Louise, am I pronouncing her last name correctly, Kugelberg?
Yes.
Co-edited and co-wrote the film with you, and co-wrote it with Claude. I'm wondering how something evolves through that kind of collaboration. I mean, I don't know where you sort of see as a painter's sort of the ultimate auteur in my mind, if you think of auteurs, more than writers, more than filmmakers. But you know, I don't know where you fall with the auteur theory, like is a film the product of one genius's imagination, or is it very much a collaboration? And how did it evolve?
Well, I would say that it's absolutely a collaboration, because I certainly couldn't have made this movie without Willem. And I certainly couldn't have made the movie without, I mean, Niels Arestrup, who plays the madman, is a really, really great actor. I mean, I was privileged enough for all of these people to say, okay. Mads Mikkelsen, who plays the priest, is, and Oscar, and I mean, all of the actors, Matthew Almeric. So I guess one thing that's important is trust. I've known Willem for 30 years. As his friend also, it was my responsibility to give him the role. I couldn't give it to anybody else.
But he's so perfect for it anyway.
And I never thought of anybody else playing the role. And when people say, oh, he's 63 and Van Gogh was 37, well, the life expectancy at that time was 41 and he was 37, and he slept on a cement floor and didn't eat sometimes, and he lived kind of a rough life. And so at 63, I'd say Willem is just about the same age.
Same age, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but what happened was at a certain moment, I guess, you go off in, you start, there are beginnings of things, and I think at a certain moment I was seeing things that Jean-Claude wasn't seeing. And I think that he did and laid a foundation for things, and did whatever I asked him, and gave me more than I could have imagined. But at a certain moment, and he knew Louise also, and Louise, she intervened in a way and started to take the vignettes and turn them into syntax. And then, more than that, being one thing is writing something, the other thing is getting out in nature and letting the wind blow you around and finding the locations. We shot in the asylum, in the Aliscamp, in Auvers-sur-Oise. We went to, I think you need to go there and do that. We were, and when Willem was in the Hotel Dieu, we had a part of the asylum that we constructed for the other hospital there. So those patients are real patients. And they wanted to be in the movie. That it's a working hospital, and a doctor who runs it was extremely enthusiastic. But it definitely had an effect on Willem and on Rupert, who played his brother. And so I guess what we did is, I mean, also if you look at the I think the paintings told us what to do.
Yeah, when you talked about the fact that you weren't operating from a traditional sort of biopic narrative, it's not like there's this huge monumental myth and legend and story of Van Gogh, and there's all these gaps that are missing because there's mysteries around certain parts of his life and death. But it's not as if you went out to kind of plug those gaps. You sort of started with the paintings, and then it seemed to flow from there into the landscape, and as if there was sort of this fluid process between the creation of the art, the nature, and what you were doing, where you sort of inserted yourself. That's the way it feels to me watching it. You can't really separate anything from anything else.
I don't think you could separate the form from the content. I don't think you're just being told something. I think that you are put into the, what I always say about painting, if you look at a Caravaggio painting, it brings you into its present. Hopefully the movie brought you into its present, and there, it's your present. So it's not really something in the third person, but something's happening to you. And if you look at his drawings and paintings, he was so far away from everybody. He was separated from society, and I think that that was emblematic of the incongruity between art and life. And the title of the movie, At Eternity's Gate, just refers to, not to the painting with that title, but to the notion that his audience wasn't going to arrive. They will show up at some other moment, and he was going to be in the vapor. And so is it a meditation on life and death? Is it about how to see anything? Maybe it's not really just about Van Gogh, but about just being alive and making anything.
But as an artist, do you have to separate yourself? Do you have to be an outcast on a certain level? I mean, personally, you don't seem to be.
Well, I mean, I'm on a stage in front of 500 people here. Does that make me feel more complete? Yeah, no. I think that everybody, I don't know how everybody has to adjust to death and a terminal case of life that we get. We're going to be healthy for a while. We're going to be I mean, it was amazing the monologue from Macbeth, where he says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its bed, he pays from day to day, from the last syllable of recorded time, right? Everybody knows that. And all our yesterdays are lighted fools away to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Anyway, that Marlon...
You're throwing it away, man.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to do that. But it's true. We all play these different parts and these roles, and we're a child for everyone. So how do you deal with it? I think when Van Gogh was painting, he felt at one with everything inside and outside of him. When I do that, that's how I feel.
Right.
I'm probably, there are other moments when I'm just another ordinary, pitiful human, grumpy, or I never like to think that I'm disingenuous. So I'm doing as best I can.
Right.
But when I'm painting, that ordinariness goes away. It doesn't really matter. I know I'm supposed to be doing that.
So
Let me just.
Yeah,
and in this case, I mean, when he said, "I am my paintings," I am my paintings. Am I this movie? Yeah, that's what I am. I mean, this is just me sitting here trying to support the enthusiasts that wanted to show the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Louise, you want to stand up because Louise wrote this and edited the movie with us. Just stand up for 1 second. Everything I have to say really is in the film.
Let's talk about the painting. There was a whole lot of painting going on. Willem Dafoe.
Is that a Jerry Lee Lewis song?
It could be.
Okay.
And I mean, Willem Dafoe taught himself, or was taught, how to paint. I don't know how self-taught he was, but he
I showed him how to hold a brush and how to look at things to where you could paint the light in.
Paint the light in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're looking at him, you'll see that if you look at his forehead, where the light hits his forehead, there's a shape there. Under his hair, there's a bright spot that's right here on his forehead. So if Willem was looking at you, I'd say, okay, just paint in the bright spot. So we'd start with that. And I say, okay, now there's another color in the middle that is not as, that's darker than the white where his hair starts, and there's this other kind of ochre and burnt sienna. We'll mix some of that together. Just paint that shape in. And so piece by piece, he would start looking at things, and at the end, it would look like something. It would come together. And I think if you look at Van Gogh's paintings, probably the thing that made everybody crazy was that they seem very fragmented, where each mark has its autonomy. And so they thought, well, how come these brushstrokes are so dissonant? But when you look at it now, at a certain moment, from a certain distance, it all comes together. And so it's a way of seeing. And maybe it takes a while for people to see that. And I think, I'm sure I made a lot of paintings, and a lot of people know who I am as a painter, but I don't really think that they know what I'm doing. And I can't worry about the fact that I'm not trying to get them to understand what I'm doing. I'm trying to paint what I'm seeing. Later, they'll figure it out. Some will get it sooner, some will get it later, but you can't really worry about that. It's the voyage that's important. So if you look at Van Gogh, I'd say he was very successful. And that whole thing that he never sold a painting and all that stuff, well, his brother was paying for him to live. He had enough money for paint. Okay, he didn't do so well with women. He wasn't so good on social level, but he absolutely was communing with nature. And when he was painting, he painted what he wanted to paint. And I think the inevitable and the evidence is his gift to us.
When you talk about dissonance and fragmentation and sort of that incredible dynamic sense that you get from his paintings, that they're moving, is it correct that, and one can only imagine, but the camera work in this film, it's so kinetic, whether it's the handheld or the way you sort of dive into the landscapes and take us with you. It's almost as if we're sort of the camera is embedded in Van Gogh's head at a certain points, and even the movement of the camera, especially through the landscape. I'm just getting the sense it's like brushstrokes. Is this conscious? Are you trying to actually emulate the movement of painting with the camera?
No.
It's worth a try.
No. But I think that there's some. Van Gogh said something that Francis Bacon quoted in 1954 when he made the Van Gogh on the Way to Work paintings. And he said, how to achieve anomalies, inaccuracies, and refashionings of reality to where what comes out are lies, but lies that are more truthful than literal fact. So another thing that he said was, when asked about his painting, he said, my color doesn't come from reality, it comes from my palette. So you think that this guy is trying to paint a painted world. Like when Erich von Stroheim was asked about Blue Angel or something. He said, well, this doesn't seem, this does nothing to do with reality. He says, of course not. It's much better than reality.
But it's funny because you've got the discourse in the film between Van Gogh and Gauguin, where Van Gogh is basically saying, I paint nature, I paint what I see, and Gauguin is saying, well, I paint what's in my head. But of course, what's kind of unsaid is that what he sees, what Van Gogh sees is kind of in his head as well. I mean, but the notion that he's painting nonfiction, if you like, in his own mind. He's just painting reality. Whereas Gauguin is painting fiction in the sense that he's kind of making it up. And I'm always fascinated by that division, almost hierarchy sometimes, between fiction and nonfiction,
Right.
and where the truth lies and where the lies lie. And what you were talking about truth and lies there is really, really interesting. I mean, when it comes down to paint, you know, how do you capture the truth of something with paint? I mean, that question you must never answer that question, I guess.
I think that Van Gogh liked seeing the way light hit things. And what Gauguin was talking about was this scientific moment where there's a field, but without the observer, the field doesn't exist. So he says, without your eyes, there's no landscape. And then obviously that led to the notion of abstraction, where he's just painting shapes, and then you can go to Matisse or something like that. But the fact is that if you look at Van Gogh, I mean, there's an exhibition right now at the Musée d'Orsay. I actually have an exhibition at the Musée d'Orsay where there's a painting of mine next to a Van Gogh painting. Till January 10th, there's where I got to pick paintings from the collection. There's two Cézanne paintings from his 20s, and two Toulouse-Lautrec paintings, and a great Manet painting, and Gauguin's painting of the trees and the. But anyway, what I wanted to say was, how did I start with that?
Well, I guess. Well, you started with.
We're talking about.
We started with truth. We were talking about truth and finding the
what
light.
he was seeing.
Yeah, finding the light.
But what happens is you're mediating something at a certain moment, and the reason I started thinking about this, you see all these different painters' version of what the painted world could be. We have to wrap this up now?
No, but they're giving me a sign that we've got to let the audience in on the conversation, which is
Sure.
okay. So let's go with the first question. Do we have one?
What is that sign? Did they go like that?
Well, no, there's some sort of semaphore off to the side there. Does somebody actually have a microphone? I can't see very.
We can repeat the questions.
Yeah, I can fill until somebody gets a microphone. All right.
Does anybody have a question? Okay. I'll repeat it.
I'll ask, because there's been many films about Van Gogh, what did you try to avoid doing with this one specifically that everything else had done to death?
Did you hear the question? He said, what did you try to do specifically that everybody else had done to death? And
In other films.
Had not done to death.
Yes.
What did I try to do that they didn't do?
Yes.
Make a cliche. I tried not to make a cliche. Anybody else? I hope I didn't.
No.
Okay.
We could always ask you what you thought of Loving Vincent.
You can ask him that question.
Go ahead.
Yes.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you for your voice. I love your work. I think beyond specifically Van Gogh or, the story that you're telling, you're such a subjective and specific poet that really helps to navigate life visually. And I love your work, and so does my husband. So thank you.
Thank you. That was very nice. Thanks.
Tough crowd.
Hello.
Okay. Yes?
So I actually have a question here. So this film made me feel that this is a recreation of the world as it was in Vincent van Gogh's eyes. And I'm just wondering, how did you do it? Because I was fascinated. It's just wonderful. And Yeah, that's my question. I'm sorry.
I wish I knew. No.
Yeah.
I think that I think we all put ourselves in his shoes. Now, when I say that, I'm not kidding. Benoit Delhomme was wearing Vincent's shoes, his pants, the cinematographer, his clothes. We sent him to Scotland because there was no wheat at that time in the south of France. So he went there and we asked him to shoot his feet. Sometimes Willem operated the camera. And sometimes, and I think that each one of us, whether it was Louise or whether it was me or whether it was Jean-Claude or whether it was Benoit or Willem, we all put ourselves in his shoes, in his present. And what we tried to do also was, we didn't want to tell you a story about Van Gogh. We wanted you to feel what it would be like just to be in a situation. I think that Willem, as an actor, had to be in a situation and react to what was happening. I don't think he was acting. He was transfigured in some way. I just think he'd been waiting all of his life to have an opportunity to sort of take everything he knew and didn't know and then put it into, or out there, into the essence of and have it recorded. And so whenever somebody was talking to him, we had them talk to the camera. And we didn't try to make the eye lines match up to where he would talk to the camera also. It was as if everyone that spoke to him was interrupting or intervening into his reverie or his reality. And when we made a painting, for example, for me, I think when you see that crummy room and it's cold and it's not cozy and they're not yellow fuzzy sunflowers when he gets to Arles. I mean, they're dead and it's cold and it's grim and he's alone, but he can take that room and turn it into that painting. You feel the drama of wanting to see that thing turn into something, and it doesn't let you down. So I think that you can actually engage in the practice of painting and see what that. So for a moment, you get the sense of that in the first person. So you get to do it, and maybe that worked. I don't know.
I think we have time for one more question. Is that it? Yeah. Go ahead. Second row.
Hi, I just want to ask, because I noticed there is some kind of blurry vision at the bottom of the screen, and my understanding is that is because of Van Gogh's own delusion. But I just wondering, like, can you elaborate more on why do you make this view, and what do you think Van Gogh sees about, like, what he sees?
Well, let me ask the audience this question. Did anybody enjoy the blurry part of the movie on the bottom there? Me personally, I thought it was, I went to a eyeglass store, vintage eyeglass store, and I bought some sunglasses. And when I walked out, I realized they were bifocals. And I looked down at the ground and saw a dip in the floor, and I thought, wow, that's great. Why don't we put that on the lens? And it was a little too small for the lens, so we had to build a split diopter. But what it does do is it gives you a specific point of view that's different than everything else in the film. So whenever you see that, you feel like he's seeing it. I'm not trying to equate that with mental illness or bad eyesight. But I think that as he gets more, his nervousness gets more exacerbated, things get more fucked up. And we also, instead of fixing this split diopter that had two different depths of field on the lens, the DP could move it around so it felt more natural. And I guess when I was making the diving bell and the butterfly, I used a swing and tilt lens, because I don't think anybody sees the world like Life magazine, where everything is crisp and I mean, I don't know about everybody in the room, but I don't see it that way. So I tried to make it more human And also, but beyond the logic of that, for example, when he runs out of the asylum and the sky is yellow and the trees are rocking back and forth, I love that moment. For me, then I think, now this looks like a movie. And then all of a sudden he runs into his own point of view. Now, what's the logic of that? How do you run into your own point of view? Who cares? The trees are cut in half. The guy is running. You feel like he's escaping and he's going somewhere, and you feel his energy. So I think there's things that are nameable and unnameable. And everybody's always trying to name everything. And maybe the difference between, say, paintings and movies is that when people who like to look at paintings look at them, they don't need to know what they mean. They are attracted to them, they feel them, or they don't. When people go to the movies, they want to know at the end of the movie, what just happened? What did that mean? What did the story? And so the thing that is accessible is that you see people acting out things that could happen to you. So it's more user-friendly in a sense. But it also comes with the caveat that people want to know what you mean. I would say that everything is compressed into one instant. And that's what you get. Life is the eternal present. That's what the movie is, and that's what you're experiencing right here. That's what happens to me every day. I don't know. I'm just a guinea pig.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're a guinea pig. Yeah, well, I think you're more than... I think you've succeeded in creating a kind of in the present Vincent van Gogh self-portrait, if you like. The movie seems to me to be a self-portrait, and I think it will get beyond that. It's maybe at the gate of eternity's gate, but right? It'll persist. Thanks very much for the film and for
thank you,
sharing
Brian.
sharing your ideas with us. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.